South Africa's G20 presidency is entering a crucial phase, and this week's C20 Civil Society Summit in Ekurhuleni delivered a clear message. Civil society wants more, stronger, transparent funding in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide and meaningful inclusion of persons with disabilities in the G20 process. These calls come at a time when South Africa has an opportunity to shape global priorities with voices grounded in the realities of our communities. Joining us now is Thulani Tshefuta, the chairperson of Civil 20 Workstream. Thulani, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Take us through the declaration of the Civil 20 Summit.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Good afternoon to you and the viewers of SABC News. C20 is one of the official engagement groups in G20 processes, which is a platform that is provided to non-state actors to have a voice in influencing what becomes of the outcome of government engagements and agreement in the official G20 platforms and processes. And so through the Civil Society Engagement Group, we have been able to mobilize more than 3,000 civil society organizations from South Africa, Africa, the rest of the global south and the world to participate in our structures and processes, which led to engagement in different working groups, which working groups were consolidated into 6 clusters as areas of focus. Essentially, we anchored our deliberations and policy proposals on making sure that we leave no one behind, on making sure that all the vulnerable and marginalized groupings, populations and communities are brought into the mainstream of the policy issues that the governments of G20 will be focusing on. At the center of it all for us, it is about policy proposals that must be considered by G20 governments that create public value. And in the very essence of the notion of public value, it is about placing people at the center of all developments. And so we have policy proposals that are in the area of Human Development Index. We have policy proposals that are in the area of trade, finance, and debt. We have policy proposals that are in the area of climate change and just transitions. We have policy proposals that are focused on mainstreaming the plight of vulnerable and marginalized communities and populations. We also have recommendations that are focused on a transformation within the global governance systems.
Let's talk about your trade, finance and debt policy proposal. What are they?
Firstly, we are specifically calling or making recommendations for cancellation of debt for the global south and the developing economies, primarily because debt service costs are standing juxtaposed to development of economies and countries that have to service those debts. Debt service costs take up the biggest portion of national budgets of developing economies, as opposed to investing in education, in health, economic and social infrastructure. And so, second to cancellation of debt, we believe that we must not tire on making calls for reparations. And thirdly, we believe that there has to be a fair system of trade, which does not, by virtue of developing countries having the constraints that they have to pay much higher debt service costs and interests than the developed economies. So that is the package of issues that we're advancing on finance and trade, including an expression of the emerging geopolitical dynamics that seek to oppress and dictate terms of trade by few countries over the majority of the countries.
Yeah. What sort of pressure could we put on the global north, and in particular the Bretton Woods institution, to begin engaging in a debt forgiveness program, a sovereign debt forgiveness program, as we've seen similar to Greece on the one instance, and assisting countries with debt restructuring programs that don't let them continue to suffer under the throttle of debt service costs, which of course constrain their fiscal programs. We've seen something like that take place more recently in Zambia and to an extent in Malawi as well. How do we begin to get those institutions, Bretton Woods institutions and the Global North, to begin taking that serious?
The starting point should be that the countries of the Global South that do indeed get this debt must show cause that this debt is not debt that is acquired in order to serve the selfish interests of the leaders and governments. Secondly, they must show cause by proving that this debt that is acquired goes into being invested into productive sectors of the economy that can attract investments, promote economic growth, leading to employment. Thirdly, we believe that when we argue the case for debt relief and even cancellation, it must be to place people at the center of economies and development more than the profits. And so we must argue a case where the people have a claim to the very same economies that the governments of the world and the markets seek to so much promote. And so if economies are to work and work for the people, definitely the institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions, would appreciate the fact that when you empower people, they graduate from being spectators in economic activities, they come to the center of economic activities, and it is only when those economies shall have grown and developed and empowered their people at the center that the very same economies will be sustainable to levels where they can be able to service the very same debt later on.
Yeah, let's talk on your policy proposal on the just energy transition as well as climate change. What are some of the key proposals there?
The issue for us on the whole package of just transitions that we are proposing is that climate is not the only one. Yes, indeed, in terms of the global change drivers that we're experiencing now, the climate change needs to have a just transition. Secondly, we note that we are in the wave of demographic transitions where we see greater youth populations than any other population groupings, and we believe that for that demographic transition to be just, we have to invest in the lives of young people now so that we can grow a demographic dividend which will asset young people as assets rather than problems in economies. And then thirdly, we believe that we are equally at the height of digital and technological changes, which changes must equally be just. And so with regards to climate change and just energy transitions, we believe that we must start from what we have as the Global South, including South Africa, which must be to utilize the God-given resources that we have to the best of our ability, including introducing technologies that may clean the coal that we have and other resources, including the issue of critical minerals that we have that may include a beneficiation within the South African boundaries. And we believe that for that transition to be just, it has to take people along. We can't just drop everything we have in favor of what we shall completely depend on others for.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. Thulani, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. That is Thulani, who's the chairperson of the Civil 20 working group, participating, of course, in the G20.